It's the second last game of the Rugby Championship. Springboks are in Santiago del Estero, a little town in the middle of Argentina, quite close to Tucumán, where they're playing this weekend. The first time Argentina have apparently played there, and the first time Springboks have definitely played there. And it's a big game for both sides. And with me again is Gavin Rich, my colleague at Supersport. Gavin, maybe let's start with being so close to Tucumán. Do we expect a bit of fireworks?
I don't know. I don't think that. Imagine if there was a game like that. Both teams would be sent to. I mean, they'd be banned from rugby. I mean, rugby has changed so much since that. When was it? In 1993.
Yeah.
That game. I mean, Keith Andrews and Tian, all the guys that are involved in that game. I mean, they will be the first to admit that if they did what they got away with that night, not that they got. I mean, it was just them. I mean, it was obviously the opposition as well. But I think that the referee probably abandoned the game or something. I don't know. So there's definitely no chance of that. Every World Rugby would have a fit if there was anything sort of approximating what happened in Tucumán.
You were you there that night? Were you on that tour?
No, I wasn't. That was one of the early tours I missed. I did most of the tours of the Boks in the first like decade back from isolation, but that one, which was in, I remember correctly, it was in September, October of. In fact, my wife was giving birth to my son Peter, in October of 1993. So I wasn't there. I remember in fact, I remember correctly, I was actually in the Drakensberg when they played one of those tests, and I watched it on TV there.
Yeah, I mean, I can just remember the grainy footage, TV, SABC footage. I think that was at that stage. Yeah, just of the game because I don't think the game was broadcast live either. We just saw these grainy footage of
It
fights and
would have been.
stuff.
Well, I no, yeah, no. I don't think the mid-big games were all
Yeah,
broadcast live, but certainly the tests were.
yeah. No, I remember the test being brought. I just saying I remember the fights on the grainy SABC footage. Somehow, it always felt like the videos from that time, and strangely enough, still today, even though we in the sort of modern technology of HD video and all this sort of stuff, sometimes tests from Argentina feel like they're being played in another dimension. The sound is always a bit strange. The camera angles are always a bit strange. I don't know. It feels a bit weird always watching Argentina.
Is it not the case also that SuperSport aren't always sending the commentators there and they're sort of doing it off of TV? I get that impression. Certainly in the Super Rugby era when South Africa when the South African teams used to go and play the Jaguares, those broadcasts were always a little bit problematic because I got the impression that the guys were sitting in the studio. I don't think we sent commentators over there for every Sharks and Lions or Stormers game
No,
played in
definitely.
Buenos Aires. Yeah, yeah.
No, definitely not. And those were horrible, those days of Super Rugby. Midnight games of the Jaguares. Well, this weekend is not much different. They're going to kick off at 11 p.m. South African time. It's apparently going to be 37 degrees on Saturday in Santiago del Estero. Quite warm, but as Rusty said the other day, they're not worried about. We come from a hot country. We'll be fine to handle it. But yeah, a rather intriguing game because the Boks generally, if they win the game, or even if they lose it with a couple of bonus points, should be able to wrap up the rugby championship. And I don't think anybody would bet against the Boks to win in Nelspruit next weekend. So it's an intriguing game because Boks don't really have much to lose, but Argentina have everything to gain if they can win this game.
Don't you think that the big talking point really is actually the selection for this game? Russi's mixed up his selections again. What do you think? I mean, do you think that he's taken a risk with these selections?
Well, I think we've got to this point now where it's not really. I don't think Rossi takes that. He takes calculated risks, if anything. What we've seen there is other than Apelele Fassi and probably the most experienced backline that he could choose at this moment, given the guys they left behind. Uh, so I don't have any. The backline is, and the fact that they selected Andre Pollard tells me they want to wrap up the rugby championship now. Up front, I think yeah, playing Ron Nokia and Salman Marat together, that's obviously something for the future. And they've gambled in the past. I remember in COVID times, remember they that one test in Port Elizabeth and the one test overseas, they also in Argentina, they played very young teams as well. They tend to get away with playing young teams against in Argentina the last couple of years. And I think at the moment there's just such confidence in that box squad that you can play anybody and they should be able to win.
My take is that this team's a lot more experienced, should I say, than the one that played in Perth against Australia. If you remember correctly, if I remember correctly, Jan-Hendrik Wessels was at loosehead prop
Lucid,
at
yeah.
that game, and Johan Krobler was at hooker. So they had almost like and Thomas, who's the least experienced of the front row this week, was actually the most experienced then. And then
Yeah.
you had Salman, and you had Ruan Noki. So I think that the fact that the Malcolm Marx is playing and that Ox is also playing is a sort of is a safety net for the Boks. I mean, they've got an experienced player there. It's very interesting that Jan Hendrik Wessels is now the backup hooker and not Johan Krobler. I suppose that's a talking point too. But looking at that side, I mean, it's a very. I remember when we got sent this, it was sent to us by Supersport earlier in the week, and then you said it's a very interesting team. And I remember looking at it and thinking to myself, an interesting team, but a very well balanced team. You've got Marco at number 6, with Ben Jason Dixon and Jasper Visa. To me, that's a very sort of well-rounded loose trio. Then in the halfbacks, you've got two very experienced guys there, as you say, with Andre and Kobus Reinach's been around the block 110,000 times now, and although it's Damien and Jesse Creel who hold the record, Lecagna and Jesse have played together quite a lot now as well. It's interesting to me that Rassie is making a bit of a trend of choosing Lecagna at 12, and to me that I wonder if that's maybe sort of like the Tony Brown influence. I remember speaking to some guys back in the day. I think Odwin Ngani was one who sort of felt that with his creative skills, I mean, Lecagna would be probably best at inside centre, and I don't disagree with that. But then he's not really the traditional South African centre that takes the ball up like Andre Esterhuizen and like Damien Delendi is. So to me, that's a very interesting departure, and to me, it indicates that the Boks are quite serious about letting the ball do more of the work than used to be the case.
Yeah, you mentioned the Kenya, Andre Estes in there. I was quite surprised that he didn't go on the tour. Yeah, he was back from. He hasn't since that Portugal game. He hasn't played for the Boks again. Okay, they played against New Zealand twice, but I would have expected him to be in this sort of squad somewhere, and he may be next week in Nelspruit. We don't know. Although probably Damon's probably going to return for that one. So I'm not sure what there. Russie did say the other night that Lecagna, when he saw him, first time he saw him play, he was playing at 12. And they've always thought that he was extremely talented as a playmaker. It's an interesting one because he's a hell of a talented player. And there's nothing wrong with that combination at all. And I suppose the thing is to try and get the outside backs away because that's one of the reasons we trying to play with more width. I think it probably is Tony Brown's influence to a large extent, but yeah, and I'd say the same for Kobus Reinach because I suppose I know Grant Williams is injured, but at 34 years old, you would have thought maybe this is the game to give somebody else a run, especially we're talking about blooding for the future. We've played Kobus Reinach quite often this year, and he's a great experienced player and he's never had a bad game for the Boks. But you also sort of think at some point the baton's going to start being passed.
Well, you made the point, and I can't remember if it was in the Ireland game. I mean, the Welsh game that started off the rugby year, international rugby year, or whether it was when they played against Ireland. But you did make the point that with the type of rugby that the Boks were trying to play, the two quicker scrum halves, being Grant Williams and Kobus Reinach, were better suited to that tempo game. And that has been, and both those players have played a lot this season. I know Faf's injured. But it has been quite noticeable that those two guys are being pushed. Whether Kobus is still going to be around in 3 years' time is another story. But it definitely it appears to be the case that those are the guys. And going back to Lecagna, he is. I mean, you do get my point that he is more of a sort of creator. He's a guy with the soft skills that maybe some of our. I mean, look, Damien Delendi's got a lot of soft skills as well. People just don't don't recognize that. But I mean, Tony Brown, I think in one of the early press conferences this year, spoke about what a great passer he is, and he is a great passer of the ball. So it's not that I'm saying that Damien Delende is a blunderbuss. Everybody reckons that he could be. He could be softer and silkier than he is. But just it is interesting just to see Lecagna playing at 12, because then it opened. I mean, look, I don't know if Lecagna is going to be around in 4 years' time, but you then can start a conversation about what kind of centers Russie's looking at. Is he maybe going to move away from the traditional archetypical South African center, which is the big guy who takes the ball up, or could we see? I'm trying to think of another rugby. I mean, I'm not so sure that Lorenzo Julius is that type of player, but
he's more 13 as well. So I think
he is more 13.
Ethan Hooker is probably the next guy they're looking at. Henko van Wyk, those two.
I think they're also 13s. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're both very young. Well, I think we've probably seen the second half is because that was going to be my next question is with Manie the BOK. I think that was the one thing I thought he might get a run as a starter. The fact they picked Andre tells me they want to close out the rugby championship because Manie hasn't played for a long time, and we know that. But in the second half, we expect Manie to be on the field at some point. And when he comes on, do they keep Lecagna there or do they move Andre to 12? I think it might be a good idea to move Andre to 12, depending on the context of the game, of course. But he can provide that sort of backup. And you've said it a number of times as well. Manie plays better when he doesn't have the goal kicking sort of on his shoulders that he has to worry about. So if you keep Andre on and you've got him as the goal kicker, then Manie might be able to free himself up in that second half.
Yeah, I'm actually not so sure about. I don't know if that's exactly what I said. I've just said that I prefer it when he doesn't have the first choice kicking responsibilities. I think the one thing about Manie actually is that he can miss kicks, and it doesn't impact in his general game that much. I mean, there have been players in South African history who if they weren't kicking well, the biggest example, the worst example is actually Ruan Pienaar. The Sharks guys, Sharks coaches used to always tell me if he missed his first kick, then they knew he was going to go walkabout for the rest of his game. I mean, we're talking about Ruan Pienaar now, the young Ruan Pienaar. I mean, the older Ruan Pienaar who ended his career at the Cheetahs was a very mature player, and he spent all that time at Ulster. So he was a different animal at the end of his career. But there was a time I remember when he was selected at flower half for the series against the British and Irish Lions when Peter de Villiers was in charge. There was a lot of talk around there, and one of my concerns was that Ruan would be brilliant on one day and not so good on the next. And if I remember correctly, he played fly half in that first test of that series, and then in the second test was the one in Pretoria. And in the first half, he had a complete nightmare and had to be replaced. That was when Morne came on and kicked the kick at the end. So Manie isn't like that. Manie can miss kicks and he can still contribute in his general play. I just would rather the Boks had somebody else on the field who could kick, which they could have now. I mean, if they played either Andre at 12 or they played Sasha at fullback, which is his other position.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we also must remember at some point Damien Willems is going to come back as well. He'd be at the 15 spot there for him as well.
Or 12. I actually think that. I mean, he'll play more there for the Stormers than he'll play at 15 because the Stormers have Warwick Gallant. So I think that. I mean, I think that Damien's position. I still think that is possibly his best position is 12.
Yeah, I was going to say the other guy who's impressed me in the Currie Cup, and fair enough, is the Currie Cup. So we'll have to see his progress in URC. Is Jordan Hendrickse at fullback for the Sharks? He's been quite exceptional since he's played 15, since he arrived at the Sharks, and you could see that becoming an option for the Boks later on in the next couple of years as well. Selection-wise, I mean, if you look at the bench, other than that, I mean, Elric Lowe and Kwagga Smith coming off the bench. I'm trying to think who the other loose forward is off the top of my head.
Talking about Saturday.
Yeah, the lock. Sorry, there isn't. There's only two. There's the lock is Eben, obviously, and then the front row. Let's talk about that. Eben equaling Victor Matfield's record off the bench. He's obviously going to have a homecoming in Nelspruit where he played his 100th. No, his 100th was in Cape Town. Sorry,
Yeah.
and he's going to have the homecoming and play his 128th game in Nelspruit next week. So we'll have a big celebration there. But he's just him like Peter Steph du Toit is just amazing. They just carry on going and deliver the same level of performance every game.
Well, I mean, I think we said in that previous chat we had after the Cape Town Stadium game that those two are probably the two indispensable guys in my book. Those are the two guys you don't want to see the Boks go without. And in a way, like I sometimes sort of, welcome a situation when Eban's not playing, like on Saturday, when we see Salman Murat play, because we don't know. Everybody talks about Salman's potential, and I've seen him. I've always rated him. I think that he is a good player, but we haven't really seen him sort of stamp down that, lay down that marker at international level. So it would be good to see Salman, especially if John Klein's coming back into the picture, playing for Munster this weekend. It would be good to see Salman, and he does seem to be the alternate captain and possibly the future captain. It would be good to see if how Salman goes. Let's just hope he stays on the field for the whole game this time. But going back to Urban, he is a guy that he's very much the sort of enforcer in the pack, and then with Peter Steph's engine. The two of them, you always look and think, well, we have seen the Boks win without Peter Steph. We saw them play with Franco Mostert on the flank against the Lions after he got injured in that second test. And I think for the rest of that year, I think Franco played 7. I think it was Swayze who first moved Franco to 7, and he's definitely got the engine for that position. It's going to be interesting now that we're talking about 7 to see Ben Jason Dixon. He was quite hard on himself after the game in Joburg. I didn't think that he was that bad, and Russie certainly isn't ready to throw him away. And he said, I mean, Russie was true to his word. He said at the press conference, I think it was the team announcement press conference, that Ben Jason will play the next game, and he is, and he's played. If the All Black game was a step backwards, most of his other games have been a step forward. So I would expect to see him excel again on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, look, Ben Jason still, to me, amongst the forwards, is the find of the season. He's just incredible work rate. The stuff he does off the ball that we don't see, and the amount of tackles he puts in. Another guy who does that is Rowan Nokia. He's impressed me, especially that game in Cape Town. But look, coming back to Salman, I wanted to ask you, because it's a constant thing. The other day after our chat and after the team announcement this week, it was a constant thing in the comments below these videos that is very much divided about whether Salman is the Springbok future captain, whether he is. I suppose people are comparing him to Eben Etzebeth, which is probably a bit unfair because there's not many locks in the world that can compare to Eben Etzebeth. But as a 4-lock going forward, there's people in the comments say they don't see the aggression. There are obviously a couple of disparaging comments that people think he's there because for other reasons other than rugby. But I mean, I've said it before, Gav. I mean, he's been an exceptional leader since school days, and he's been touted as a future Springbok captain since then. Do you think there's any reason to doubt Salman?
Well, absolutely not. And also, other reasons other than rugby. I mean, what is that? Salman was at the Craven Week in 2016 when it was in Kersney.
Sorry, just to address that, it's the age-old thing that with any player who's not white is selected, people question because of his color, which is, I also thought we moved beyond that, but there are still some people out there, and if that's you, please move on. Anyway, carry on. Sorry, again.
Well, there's a reason why John Dobson has Salman as a Stormers captain, and there's a reason why Russie. Let's face it. I mean, Russie. Everybody loves Russie, so Russie must know what he's doing. He's worked with Salman enough, and so he obviously, and he said a couple of times that he sees him as a future captain, and it's demonstrated by him selecting him as the captain. I mean, every time there's an alternative captain needed, other than in the Wales game where Peter Steph did the job, when Sia was absent, it's Salman they turn to, and I have seen Salman play some great game. The only problem with Salman, and I've said it to you before, is that he needs to stay on the field. and not get injured. And it's little unfortunate injuries. Like the last one was an HIA, if I remember correctly. And if someone stays on the field and he stays for the whole game, he's got a physical. He does have a physical presence. He is very much a very good sort of number 4 lock who maybe needs to just get a little bit of momentum. I don't see the issue. I think that okay, here's a question. Has Salman lost a game for the Boks when he's played? I don't think he has.
I don't think he has either. Yeah.
Yeah, so
but I mean, I'll take it back to somebody like Peter Steff. I remember at the start of his career, there was a lot of questions about him and about injuries as well, and about. I mean, I think you mentioned it in the chat before the Cape Town game, when that horrible game he had against England, and people doubted him. I think what we're going to realize is the Springbok coaches, they've won 2 World Cups, they know what they're doing. And I trust them in this. I mean, I've seen him play good games at provincial level. I'd like to see him have the same sort of impact at international level. We haven't seen it
yeah.
yet, but that doesn't mean it's not coming.
I'll tell you when I saw him play an outstanding game was, and I can't remember who the Stormers were playing. It was in a Champions Cup game, and he was absolutely. I think it might have been London Irish, but who don't exist anymore. But he was absolutely outstanding for half an hour in that game. I remember he was almost like, and before that, I think there was a game against Edinburgh as well. I mean, he was very much the man of the match on the field, and then he got an injury and was out for the rest of the season. And I remember the Stormers were playing the Bulls the following week. It was obviously just before the Christmas derby that year. It was obviously going into the 2022 Christmas derby. And I remember thinking that the Stormers without Salman were going to really struggle. That's how good Salman was in that game. And if I remember correctly, that's my favorite expression at the moment. It was Ben Jason Dixon who was then moved into the Stormers second row, and the Stormers still beat the Bulls, but it was a stage when the Bulls just couldn't beat the Stormers. But yeah, Salman was outstanding in that game, and I've seen him very much sort of like a head and shoulder above other players in some of the games that he's played, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's not the case again on Saturday.
I suppose we should talk about Argentina a bit. New coach Philippe Contepomi, they beat the All Blacks this year. They obviously stuffed the Aussies in that last game, although it did seem to me very much like the Wallaby teams we saw. I was thinking it reminded me a lot of that 61-22 in Durban. And I think
Pretoria.
it was Corals
Pretoria.
last game. Was in Pretoria.
Yeah, it was in Pretoria. Yeah, it was in Pretoria. Yeah.
Pretoria, you're right. Sorry. And Corals last game, and it just seemed like in that second half, the Aussies just gave up, and they just allowed. There wasn't any effort in that game. I think if I was Joe Schmidt, I would have been horrified by that sort of what I saw there. But they're obviously playing a very different game under Philippe Contepomi. They like helter-skelter rugby. They like to get momentum and use that momentum against you. And yeah, I think the Boks was clever enough not to fall into that trap as New Zealand did in that first test. New Zealand came back. That second test was the perfect example of how to play Argentina. But yeah, I don't know. I'm expecting them to be tough. I'm expecting it to be a typical Argentinian game where there's a lot of helter-skelter, lots of stuff going on at the same time, lots of contentious stuff, a crowd that's going to be in your face the whole time. And that's a good test for some of these young Boks players. But I expect the Boks to be a lot more streetwise than people give them credit for at times.
But you asked me the question about the Argentina team. In the past, people often used to talk about them as being like France, and it wasn't really valid because to me the Argentina are sort of like a poor version of us in the old days when we were playing that sort of like very physical game, and that was all we were sort of doing. They would get sucked into the sort of physical game when they played against the Boks. But the reason I say they're now becoming more like the old France is because if you watch that Australian game, I mean the passes just stuck. And when the passes stick, and also at stages of that All Black game, there was quite with the one they won, obviously. There were times when they were playing that Helter Skelter game, and it worked for them. And that's what you've got to be careful of. It's a little bit like I would imagine an opposing team playing against the Stormers. You just know that they've got the capability of maybe scoring 3 quick tries out of nowhere. just because they've got those players and they've got that willingness to sort of play with some ambition. So that's the danger, is that I can see Argentina possibly getting away to a quick start or something like that. It's not beyond the realms of possibility, but I just think that the one thing that irritates me is people keep always talk about the Argentine scrum, the strength of the Argentine scrum. I haven't seen a really strong Argentina scrum for quite a long time now. And the All Blacks completely annihilated them in that game at Eden Park. And I think that's where the Boks are going to just be too good for them as up front. I know they've worked on their line out and they've brought different variations on their line out. But I just think that when it comes to the set piece, like the All Blacks were, I think the Boks are just going to be so superior, and I think that's where the platform for the victory is going to be laid.
Yeah, I think when I say that, like Helter Skelter Rugby, their backline, there's a bunch of sevens players there. They like obviously broken field play, and they can do a lot with broken field play. And this isn't the first team that the Boks have played. I mean, the All Blacks are masters of broken field play, and they didn't score try in Cape Town. So yeah, I think the Boks are streetwise enough to handle whatever Argentina throws at them. It's going to be a very interesting game if we can all stay awake. We are obviously game's going to finish around about 1 a.m. Pity some of us who are writing match reports at that stage, but we're not going to get much sleep on Saturday night. But let's go for a prediction, Gav. I'm going to go. I'll go first, and I'll say the Boks will win by 10 to 12 points.
Okay, my prediction is that it's not just Urban celebration in Nelspruit next week. It's going to be the Springboks' inauguration as the new rugby championship champions. So yes, I do think that the Boks are going to win. And unfortunately, I'd like to differ with you and like sort of to make it more interesting, but I'd say probably 10 to 12 points as well. I'd be surprised if it was closer than that. So I do think that the Boks will win. Rassie has, he keeps confounding us. Well, he doesn't really, because we expect him to change his team up. So there is always that sort of element of risk, but I think there's less of an element of risk to this team than the one that played against Australia in Perth. And I told you why I think that there's a lot more experience in the engine room this time, and I think the Boks will win.
I just want to say you were a lot less bullish than you were in Cape Town. You said another Twickenham. So this is more circumstance.
They're not playing the All Blacks, and there's always a chance that we might sort of be a bit more complacent. And I just thought that the Boks would really be up for that game in Cape Town, and that I do think that there's a big difference between the Boks and a bigger difference than the scoreline suggests between the Springboks and the All Blacks currently. And that's what I was saying at that time. There is a big difference between the Springboks and New Zealand and Argentina. Obviously, it's just that. I've been to Argentina. I know how difficult it is to play. Well, not that I've played there, but just going there to watch and how aggressive the crowd gets. It's a little bit like France. They've got that sort of Latin temperament. The players have that Latin temperament. Give them an opening, get the crowd in behind those teams, and then they're very, very dangerous. Yeah. I remember the game there. And you're talking about it was in 1993 when the Boks, and I wasn't there. I saw them on television. When Ian McIntosh was the coach, and the Boks were all over the Argentinians in the first half. Then in the second half, they got like a lucky break and got a try. And then suddenly it was a completely different game. It was a completely different game, and the Springboks had to really hang on at the end. Another game that I remember, 2000, I think it was at La Plata, at what's that famous stadium, River Plate.
River Plate, yeah.
Yeah, it was Harry Fillion's first test in charge.
Don't kick.
Yeah, I was there that day, and he told the team not to kick. And I'll never forget, like, we played this helter skelter rugby against them. We took an early lead, and then they came back and they were all over us. And eventually, Harry had to give Andre Markgraf the instruction to tell the Boks to kick. And apparently Percy, who was, I think, if I remember correctly, was playing fly half that day. Percy sort of said, "What? I mean, but that's not our instruction. We're not supposed to kick." So and that was and I'll never forget walking across that ground afterwards and bumping into Andre Vos, who was the captain. And I remember him, he was going somewhere and I was heading to the press conference. And I don't know why he wasn't at the press conference, but he said, "What did you think?" And I remember not quite knowing what to say because it was such a weird game. And But the point I'm making, though, is not so much because we're not going to be doing something stupid like that on Saturday. The point I'm making is give the Argentinians a little bit of wind in their sails, give them a little bit of an opportunity. and they suddenly become so much more difficult to beat. And that's the problem. You give them an early start on Saturday, let them get off to a good start, and then suddenly we've got a problem.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I think, my last word is, I know the Boks can win ugly if they need to. They're going to obviously, hopefully, try and win pretty. But I still think they've got enough either way to win. As you say, the big thing is just don't give Argentina a look in that game. But that's been good. It's been a good chat. Let us know what you think, if you've enjoyed it. Had a whole lot of comments after the last one, some interesting ones as well. But yeah, let us know. And if there's anything you want us to address, please put in the comments as well. We'll chat about it then. Gav, I'll see you in Nelspruit. We'll chat soon again. And next week we'll both be in Nelspruit for this chat. So yeah, please come back and have a look at that. And if you haven't already, subscribe. It's always good to see you, new subscribers. But thanks for watching.